Hello and welcome back to this tutorial where we're going to be talking about lenses. So I'm going to be showing you different types of lenses and how each of them affects the image and what type of lens you should use for what type of shot. So let's get to it. So as we open here Blender, once we select our camera here in the Blender, and we go here to the camera settings here, as you can see, usually it's maybe somewhere, I don't know, here, but once you come here to the camera settings, you see this setting here. It's called focal length. So what is focal length? Focal length is like let's call it a camera lens value. Here it's in millimeters, and that is like the, let's call it the international way of measuring camera value. So once you come here, you'll see that the default focal length that is set here is 35 millimeters, and most people usually render out their work using this default focal length, but that is wrong, because depending on what kind of shot, you need to use a different kind of focal length. So let's see what happens when we change this value over here. Once I will press 0 on the keyboard, on the numpad, and it will take me to the camera view, and I'll essentially just show you what happens when I go in. When I pump up the value, the camera kind of zooms in, and when I take it out, the camera zooms out. Now this is not zooming. I mean, you shouldn't come here and take up the focal length value hoping that you will zoom in your image. This is something that is totally different. Every value that I put here is going to affect the psychology of the image. When I say the psychology of the image, it's going to affect how somebody is going to be feeling once they view the image. So I'm sure once maybe you're new in Blender or new in 3D or whatever software that you might be using there, when you look at this value, you think maybe it's just another place where you can zoom in, but that's not true. So let's go in deeper and talk about these focal lengths. So what do these focal lengths do? So what they essentially do, they usually change the way the image feels like. I have this image here downloaded from Google. Credit goes to the owner of the image. So here you can see we have the same picture taken in different focal lengths. Here this is 24 millimeters, this is 35 millimeters, this is 50 millimeters, this is 70, this is 100, this is 135, this is 165. I want you to notice something that is happening in the image. When you go to lower focal lengths like this one, 24 millimeters, what happens is you get this kind of feeling. You see, like, the nose here seems to be a little bit bigger. So let's say you want your subject, maybe you have a character there, you want the character to look and feel beautiful, and this wouldn't be a nice selection of focal length. Like that default one in Blender, which is 35 millimeter, you can see what it does. It's almost the same as the 24 millimeters, but it makes the face or the nose look bigger. So if you want to take a nice close-up, by the way, after I finish this, I'll be showing you shortcuts and what type of focal length you should use for what type of shots. But I want you first to see the difference that it does to the image, and then the subject, and then the background. So these lower focal lengths, what they do is like they kind of make that point at the center of the image feel like it's bigger. Okay, so if maybe you might have noticed, once you take a selfie with your camera, maybe at some certain angles, you see that your face looks ugly, because if you examine these how many images there, 7 images, it's essentially the same person, but she looks totally different in each focal length. So here in 24 millimeters, she's not as beautiful as the way she is here in the 165 millimeters. So that is essentially what I'm talking about. But also you can notice there's some difference here in the background. The background in the 24 millimeter is bigger than the 35 millimeter, or let's say than the 165 millimeters. Let me show you here in another image what I mean. You can see in this image we have the same character taken using, this is a 16 millimeter focal length. You can see here the house can be seen, but as you go to 35 millimeters, and what is happening is that as you can see here, the cameraman or the camera woman is actually going a little bit back with every focal length. I mean, the higher the focal length, she goes back to try and match the shot. Okay, so look the way this 16 millimeter has done to her face in this picture over here at the middle, and you can see it kind of, it makes her head looks, let's say, ovalish. It's not that beautiful when using it on characters' faces. So also notice something on the background. In this 16 millimeter shot, the house can be seen. The same case in this, the one at the middle, the cameraman can be seen on the back. But as you go higher, the house starts to disappear. In the 35 millimeter, the cameraman disappears in this one. So you see, it's like you've tried to take in the same picture in the same kind of relationship between the subject and the camera, but what happens is that the background is disappearing. Not disappearing, it's like becoming smaller, or should I say, like you're zooming in on the background while remaining the same on the subject. So the subject is actually this person right here, and the background is everything behind, just in case you do not understand what the subject is and what the background is. So as you go here to 50 millimeters, you can see we can no longer see the house, but you can see this little tree here, which when you go back to 16 millimeter, it was like somewhere very in the back there. But as we go higher in focal length, the trees, this little tree that was once very small here, is actually becoming bigger and bigger. And as we come here to 85 millimeters, we cannot see the house completely. Now as we go to 200, now we start to see that we are losing the tree. So you see the difference and what has happened. And I also want you to notice something that has happened here. The camera person or camera woman, she's actually going back because she's trying to match the shot. That's why I told you before, once we were in a Blender, like this is not something, I mean, you shouldn't think of it as as a function of zooming, even though it does zoom, but I want you to see the changes the way it does. So she essentially goes back in distance in comparison to the camera, to the subject, so that she can get the same kind of shot. I mean, let me say image, the same kind of image. As you can see here, it's mostly like a close-up. It's a close-up in every millimeters, in every focal length, but the only difference is the focal length, the way it treats the image. So that is essentially it. So that is something most people do not know when they start off in this 3D. Well, they might create something that is good and beautiful, but they may not know how to frame it, how to make it look amazing. So one thing that I think maybe you might have noticed until now is that these lower focal lengths are not good for close-ups. So what do I mean when I say close-ups? Close-ups, I mean, like, for example, you wanted to take this kind of shot, like this one at the middle here. Maybe perhaps I should just ask you this question: which one would you have preferred? Which one of these images looks nice? Well, most you can say somewhere from here, from 50 millimeters and above. It looks nice because of the way the face is forming. The way the face looks like. Essentially, this person actually looks more beautiful with higher focal lengths from 50 millimeters and above. And in fact, in film, 50 millimeters is actually the standard for all kind of close-ups. Yeah, because essentially at 50 millimeters you tend to have this kind of image there's actually beautiful. I hope that's the right way to say it. And in photography, I'm also a photographer. We usually use 70 millimeters for portraits, and it's okay, you can also use any of those and above, but essentially around 50 millimeters to, let's say, to somewhere here 85 millimeters, it usually gives you this nice little feeling, on the face. But we are going to talk deeper on conveying emotions and other things. But the first thing that I wanted you to notice was the way this background is being, the difference between the background and the subject, what happens when you change focal lengths. And that is essentially the same thing. You can do it in Blender. So if I was going to, for example, let's what, maybe let me end here, and then I'm going to show you the way you can use each of those focal lengths and for what purposes they can be used, each of them individually. So see you in the next tutorial, and thank you for watching.